A Nigerian politician is one of two people accused of plotting to harvest the organs of a child after bringing them to the UK. The 60-year-old man and a 55-year-old woman appeared in court charged with conspiracy to arrange the travel of a person with a view to exploiting them. The alleged victim, a 15-year-old boy, has been taken into care. The Metropolitan Police have said they're deeply sorry for their failings in the investigation into murders by serial killer Stephen Port. Port is serving a whole life sentence after he killed 4 young men in East London in 2014 and 2015. The force is being reinvestigated after an inquest found police failures probably contributed to the deaths of 3 of his victims. And lastly, President Joe Biden says he's deeply disappointed after the Supreme Court ruled against limits on carrying handguns in public. New York and 8 other states require individuals to have a licence and proper cause, even if they pass criminal background checks. The Conservative majority court, though, ruled these strict regulations are an unconstitutional violation of the Second Amendment right to bear arms. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Mark Steyn.
The reason we need a GB News is because of Britain's awful groupthink media, which ensures that any number of issues are either not discussed at all, vaccine injuries, for example, or Julian Assange being shipped off by Priti Patel to die in an American prison, or they're discussed entirely dishonestly. The migrant tide on the southern shore, or those quote-unquote grooming gangs of quote, Asian men. Grooming gangs is a phrase designed to anaesthetize your feelings about men who gang rape little girls, urinate on little girls, dangle girls off the balconies of blocks of flats, douse girls in petrol, and then dance around them with lit matches. Grooming. Is that really helpful, that word, or does it just make vivid things like gang rape all a bit blurry and soft focus? And as for, quote, Asian men, let's swap the casting and imagine what would happen if Pakistani Muslim girls in Rotherham, Rochdale, Oldham, Oxford were being gang raped by white working-class Englishmen. Do you think the media would be discreetly referring to them as European men? If you can't talk about a problem honestly, you're unlikely to fix it, which is why young girls go on being raped by Asian men in towns up and down the land. Sammy Woodhouse was on this show last night, as she has been many times. Sammy's tormentor, Arshad Hussain, the man who ruined her life, was offered a deal by South Yorkshire Police. Hey, just return that 14-year-old girl you've knocked up and we won't arrest you. And yet the political class and the media and big tech all seem to agree that we need to shrivel the bounds of public discourse even further. Even when these people are part of the story, there's apparently no story. Angela Rayner is one of the MPs for Oldham. When she crosses her legs in front of Boris Johnson, it's hold the front page for weeks on end. But when 12-year-old girls in her town are being trafficked for gang rape inside Oldham police station itself, it's a big fat nothing. Angela Rayner's Oldham. Nightmare on Ginger Growler Street, where the monster is inside the building. Employed by Oldham Council. Poor little Sophie, raped by at least 8 different men in one day, is already forgotten. The consequences of the group thing are most apparent on the biggest issue of the last 2 years. Nadine Dorris's Orwellianly named online harms bill is bad enough as it is, but now all the usual suspects are determined to make it even worse by adding to it so-called health misinformation. This push to turn an already disgraceful bill into a full-fledged censorship law comes at the behest of self-proclaimed fact-checkers such as Full Fact, an organization funded by American gazillionaires, many of them big tech types, who already exercise near total planet-wide control over access to information, but who'd like it to be even more totally total. No self-respecting Briton should surrender his free speech rights to an alien money bags like full fact, least of all in the area of health misinformation. What do they mean by that term? All those people who told us last year that these vaccines are 95% effective at preventing you from getting the COVID, jab, jab, jab. That's not true. Justin Trudeau's been jabbed 4 times and he's just had his 3rd bout of the COVID. Oh, but don't worry, he says, if he were unvaccinated, his COVID would be even worse. That's not actually true either. Quote unquote, health misinformation is a particularly sharp example of what happens when you restrict free speech. Because in this area, when you restrict free speech, people die. Millions and millions of people around the world are now chronically sick and will never work again and have huge medical bills that will impoverish them for the rest of their lives because there was no honest conversation about the pros and cons of taking experimental drugs. There was no honest conversation about the ethics of pressuring people to take drugs not for any medical reason, but in order to keep their jobs. And indeed, if you advanced any view on these so-called vaccines, contrary to the groupthink, the likes of Full Fact and their chums at Facebook, Google, Twitter would label you instantly as misinformation. And as a result, thousands upon thousands of people have died. This week, something remarkable happened. Vicky Spit, a regular on this show who lost the love of her life to the vaccine, was informed by the government that she would be the first person in the UK to be compensated because the vaccine had killed her loved one. Next up was Joe Ward, another guest on this show and another victim of the vaccine, who lost his dad to the AstraZeneca and is now the second person who'll receive compensation from the government. Joe spoke to me a week ago along with another vaccine victim who also lost her father, Kelly Hatfield.
How can our cases be weak when you have a death certificate and we had 10 months of coroner's court and I've read my dad's post-mortem, I've seen everything to do with my dad. How is that a weak case? What court can we go to when AstraZeneca have got legal indemnity to being prosecuted? Obviously, we're all going through the vaccine damage payment scheme. Obviously, my application's been in for over a year now, so no help is forthcoming there.
Well, it took a while, but the help has belatedly come forth. Kelly contacted us today to say that her mum is being offered the same compensation by HMG as Vicky and Joe for the loss of her father to the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's a miserable 120,000 quid, but even so, this week alone, the government has offered to pay over £250,000, just the 3 guests of the Mark Steyn show, belonging to a category that hack twerps such as MSP John Mason and the speech controllers of the internet deny even exists. Victims of the vaccines. Over 500,000 of them in the UK alone. So we have crossed a threshold. Her Majesty's government, which from Her Majesty down told us to get the shot and it was perfectly safe, has now acknowledged for the first time that in fact these vaccines kill people. And yet, even as the government recognises what it has done, the sick totalitarian freaks of social media continue to suppress all dissent. Leilani Dowding knows a little bit about that, and we are glad to have her back with us. It's great to see you, Leilani. Are you worried about the internet, which used to be a fairly lively place a couple of decades ago, and it is considerably less so now? Are you worried that they're still determined to restrict any honest discussion of these subjects?
Yeah, they absolutely are. As you've mentioned, I was actually deplatformed from Instagram with 67,000 followers. I went to a lot of the anti-lockdown and anti-mandate protests. I put pictures up. They got pulled down off the internet. I still know a lot of people now who have to speak in a kind of code. They can't say vaccine injury. They have to say the injury from the medical procedure. So there's still a lot of code words because you will get flagged immediately. The last ban I had on Twitter was for 24 hours. That was for asking why And by the way, I'm so glad these people are getting the compensation that they deserve. It's not enough, but I'm glad they're getting something and it's being acknowledged. But I said, why are the big pharma companies not paying this out? Why are they indemnified? Why is it the taxpayers paying for something people were coerced into? I got banned on for that for 24 hours. But I was completely taken off Instagram because, I questioned masks. I said, I don't believe masks are going to stop a virus. I said the lockdowns will hurt the economy more than the lives that they'll save. And I said, I don't know the long-term effects of the vaccine. I don't want it. There could be all sorts of side effects. And, that was a long time ago. I got completely wiped off Instagram. And I can't get my account back, even though we know this all to be true. I mean, like you said, people are getting vaccine damage payouts now. So it's a fact, but people still have to speak in code. And the craziest thing about it is there's videos up of Biden all over the internet still saying, if you get the COVID vaccine, you will not catch COVID. You will be okay, right? That's still up there. That's not flat misinformation. And then you have people that say, but nobody said you won't catch COVID. It will just be a lesser version. No. Not flagged as misinformation. So if I was to say, oh, masks work, lockdowns work, the vaccine is safe, I'll have no flags and I could be on Instagram happily ever after and all the other social media with no issues at all.
But you know what's wrong here, Leilani? And everything you've said is quite correct. But for some reason, you are regarded as the problem. You're a thought criminal. We've embraced the thinking of communist dictatorships. All your positions are incredibly reasonable. And likewise, some person says, well, I hear what you're saying about the mask, but I'd just feel a bit safer if I went into the supermarket with my mask on. That's reasonable too. But only one side of it gets banned. Virginia Lamb, who was on this show yesterday, who's got Guillain-Barré syndrome, and she spent the first year basically thinking she caught this from the vaccines, and she thought she was all alone. Because if you go on the internet to see if anyone else is talking about that, they've all been blocked and cancelled and shut down by Twitter and Facebook and Google. Only one side gets shut down.
Absolutely, and I had a plumber over my house today, Tyler. He was doing the bathroom. He told me that after his second or third jab, he got Bell's palsy within a couple of days. So, it's happening, it's out there, but as you said, there's only one side that's allowed to put their side across. So these aren't, and it's not fact checkers, they're against the narrative checkers. They're opinion censors. They're not fact checkers because these aren't facts. It's come out now that you couldn't say that there's a possibility that the COVID came from Wuhan, but it's more than likely that happened. It came out of Wuhan University. It's more than likely that was the case. But they haven't corrected anything. You've still got misinformation banners there. People were still censored, and it's not just the likes of me. It's cardiologists, epidemiologists, lawyers like Robert F. Kennedy. They've all been censored. And the thing is you've got these fact checkers that are supported and funded by Soros, Facebook, Google. You've got all of them, and now they're trying to lobby the government to pass and put medical disinformation into the online harms bill. So that's going to mean that maybe I wouldn't just get censored, I'd actually get fined, or it would be seen as criminal for me to have said what I've said that now comes out to be true. So you can't lump science into protecting children, because I'm all for the online harm bill if it's simply to protect children. But it's not. It's to stop speech. And these people like, factcheck.org and all of the rest of them, trying to stop us being able to speak harms everything. And, this online harms bill is just so dangerous to free speech.
You're quite right about it. This protecting children. Unfortunately, you, the citizen, are the child, and the government is the big nanny that knows not what's best for you. After these last 2 years, there are no adults. We're all children in the government nursery. Thank you very much, Leilani. We reached out to Full Fact for a comment, and they said, we hope GB News viewers will join us in asking MPs to use their vote to improve access to... Yeah, this is all the blah, blah boilerplate that they just responded with. But they say this too. When Full Fact does make mistakes, we say so publicly. We hope GB News will eventually do the same, following our fact checks earlier this year. Ooh, you saucy minx. Saucer of milk for little Miss Full Fact. That's very catty. Here's my problem with Full Fact. Ofcom, which regulates this show, we can't put a minute of telly or radio on the air in the UK if it falls afoul of Ofcom. And Ofcom are now partnering with Full Fact. Ofcom is supposed to be a dispassionate arbiter of British broadcasting. If it's partnering with Ofcom, it's taken a side, especially after the last 2 years. So they should just get the hell out of it. People are dead because of the restrictions on free speech encouraged by the likes of Full Fact and Ofcom and all these other so-called bodies. I said yesterday that the story of these vaccines, which don't really meet the definition of that word, is a national scandal and an international scandal. One lady who was on top of it before most of us is the best-selling author Naomi Wolf. And it's always great to see Naomi. She does great research on this subject every day. I put it that way, a national and an international scandal. One thing as we learn more and more, the abyss seems to get bigger and bigger. And it's a terrible thing. We're asked not to see the evidence of our own eyes, the number of Guillain-Barré sufferers in one small North Lancashire hospital, the unexpected rise in stillbirths in Ontario, young fit sportsmen, a National Football League American football player just the other day, 26 years old. All these people dropping dead all over the world. How big do you think this scandal is?
Well, Mr. Steyn, thank you so much for the work you're doing. I really love your country. I spent, a number of years in Great Britain, and I always cherished its innovation, to humanity on issues of freedom of speech and personal liberty. And it's tragic. I mean, what a shock that Ofcom is going to partner with this, this tech bro funded Full Fact entity. That is yet another blow against the great British tradition of freedom of speech. And it's horrible. I'll answer that, but just I want to validate your point about internet censorship. My book, The Bodies of Others, follows the money. And we found, of course, that millions of dollars that these tech companies are invested in the lockdowns and the vaccines on every side of this debacle. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation flowed millions of dollars to a lot of British legacy media. I'm free to say this on your show. No one I usually write for or speak for, from The Guardian to the BBC, is asking me to say it on their show because they took the money, or on their site, they took the money. Millions went for vaccine education or COVID education from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That means they can't cover the catastrophic harms emerging from the worst public health mistake ever made in our era, which is the rollout of these vaccines. Bill Gates, of course, it owns a chunk of Microsoft, which makes the vaccine passports. Salesforce makes the vaccine passports. Google owns Baseline, which is where you sign in when you get a COVID test in a big chain of American drugstores. And over again, you see these COVID dashboards, including your own Office of National Statistics dashboard, hiding the data sets or partnering with third parties that are also invested, like Bloomberg, through the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg Health Foundation to benefit from the vaccines and from the lockdowns. And lastly, tech companies also benefit, like even Amazon and Zoom and again Google. They're up 20 to 25% after 2 years in which they were instrumental in lobbying for policies and messaging dangers, right, and inflating dangers that led to lockdowns, lockdowns of high streets and main streets. So Amazon got to crush their competition. They're up literally 20 to 25% net revenue. Your child couldn't go to in-person school in many countries. No in-person worship, no in-person shopping, no in-person restaurants or bars. So you're driven onto digital platforms. And not only do you have to do all your commerce then on digital platforms, fattening the coffers of these entities, but also I'm CEO of a tech company. Every minute you're on a digital platform, your data or your attention are being monetized and harvested. So the argument of the bodies of others was these policies, they don't make sense medically, but they make sense to recreate our world so that all of our social life is redirected onto a medium that they can control. And also, it's an echo effect where they amplify, as your previous guest said, the fears, wrongly. They report the data wrongly. I had a back and forth that was fascinating with the guy who built the Office of National Statistics dashboard, where he conceded that, they were lying basically and using bad data or holding the data so that there would be a spike after a holiday, which is ridiculous because it's a machine doing the counting, right? But they also get to, as you're seeing, police, people like me, people like Dr. McCullough, Dr. Malone, the dissident doctors in your country that I no doubt have never heard of because I'm dependent on Google to tell me, to make sure that we don't get hurt and people are alone with their suffering. And going to the harms, shall I launch in with the harms that were, that they didn't tell you about with these vaccines? Because it is absolutely catastrophic and worse than even the last time I spoke with you. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah. Well, No. Well, just let me ask you about that and connect it with the politics, because I'm astonished to just randomly come across, since Joe Biden and the gang have said, you got to jab your 6-month-olds. I'm astonished to see these pictures of mums proudly taking their babies to get the shot. Louisiana, I think some school board in Louisiana proudly putting on the internet either kindergartners or grade 1 children proudly saying they've had the shot, as if what is known about these vaccines is not known to tens of millions of people in your country and elsewhere.
Well, probably in Britain, as in America, there are now 2 different communities, right? There are people who, follow you, maybe can follow alternative news sources and know the dangers of these injections, know that there's a statistically non-existent risk to children, and know, certainly from the work we're doing with the Pfizer documents that, children are catastrophically harmed by these injections, and that the risks far outweigh the benefits. And then there are other people here in America, loved ones of mine who read the New York Times and, listen to NPR, have no idea. And there's also this cult mentality, no doubt in Britain as well, where people have become mentally ill and kind of agoraphobic and obsessive compulsive around their children. And, I know parents who don't let kids play in playgrounds or go into supermarkets if they're not masked, or they don't let them have play dates. And so now they're rushing to get the injection for their children so their kids can socialize. And there's like these people are so evil who created this. There's a dynamic of using people to police other people. So people, even if they don't believe in the vaccine or, might have heard of harms, they don't want to be ostracized or, have their child kept out of those play dates or be disinvited from the PTA or the cocktail party or whatever. It's truly evil. But the harms we're seeing, I have these 3,000 highly credentialed volunteers ranging from physicians and RNs to biostatisticians, lab clinicians, medical fraud investigators, reading through the 55,000 documents released via court order that were internal Pfizer documents that the FDA, our watchdog for, safety in food and drugs, asked the court to keep hidden for 75 years. And it shows, as you said, it shows tens of thousands of strokes, neurological diseases, Bell's palsy, Guillain-Barré beyond number. It shows joint pain with healthy young people. It shows 1,200 deaths in 3 months. 4 of them died the day they were injected. Massive anaphylactic reactions to the polyethylene glycol, which is a petroleum product, in the injections. And now we know the mechanism of these injuries. There are lipid nanoparticles that vary in size. These are hard, fatty casings. They are liquid on being frozen, but solid at room temperature and body temperature. These are visible in the FDA Pfizer documents. They say we can see these particles. This is why the injection is off-white rather than clear. Why can we see these particles? These particles are going into the bloodstream. They're not aspirating. This is a peer-reviewed study I just read this morning in the Journal on Infectious Diseases that shows that, and the Pfizer documents show that the injections don't stay in the muscle. They go into the bloodstream. They lodge in the liver, the spleen, the adrenals, the lymph system. If you're a woman, in the ovaries. The journal Andrology has just found the injections suppress sperm count and sperm motility. The Pfizer documents show that they suppress lactation. They get polyethylene glycol, a petroleum product, as I mentioned, into breast milk. And babies are dying. You mentioned a die-off in Ontario, Canada. There's a doubling, as I may have mentioned, of babies dying in Scotland. And it's so interesting. I love Britain. I lived in Scotland. Watching the BBC report that, they did everything possible to not say that they said it's a signal. They didn't say twice the number of babies are dying, twice the usual number of babies are dying. And that's the truth. There are baby deaths up in Haifa, Israel. And so this is a catastrophic harmful thing. And there's, to wrap up my riff, if you like, we've also found unbelievably significant, not just ties, but origins of the injection with China and the CCP. And just yesterday, we found that the great majority of adverse events were in Western Europe and North America. Only 7,000 were in all 56 other countries combined, though it was a global rollout. And that Chinese scientists showed in August of 2021 that if you go right into the bloodstream, a mouse, 31% of the mice had enlarged and damaged hearts. But if you stay in the muscle, there's less damage. And sure enough, the CDC and your own National Health stopped aspirating. So they knew that it was harmful, and there's 100% tech transfer. This is my last data point in the SEC filing of BioNTech, which is Pfizer, to China. Of this material to China at the end of 2021. So that is why my conclusion is that this is a national security issue and aimed at the West.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Naomi. I'm reminded, I think, of the Clinton era. Bill Clinton made it through that because, if you're a regular politician, you just have one scandal, and that people can focus on that, and that takes you out. Bill Clinton had 1,000, so people couldn't keep up. And it's a bit like this with these vaccines. They cause myocarditis, they cause Guillain-Barré syndrome, they're in your breast milk, they lower your sperm count. They're doing everything. And the guys who are pushing them are probably betting that is the way to go, that if there's 1,000 different adverse effects, people will just not be able to concentrate. But you're doing splendid work, and we love hearing your updates on this thing, Naomi. Thank you very much. Your thoughts coming next. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Plus, you want some good news in the dismal news cycle of 2022. Andrew Lawton has some for us. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
and we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let's hear what the people have to say. Carl, we wanted to know who fact-checks the fact-checkers. Carl says, he's way beyond that. Carl says, who fact-checks the fact-checkers? Oh, terrific, Carl. That's very good. Who takes care of the caretaker's order while the caretaker's busy taking care? Old novelty song from the 1920s. I can go, what is it? Who gets tents with the tent maker's order while the tent maker's busy making tents? You probably can't sing that on air. It sounds faintly menacing, talking about the caretaker's daughter, taking care of the caretaker's orders. Could almost be Rotherham or Rochdale or Oxford or Oldham or Telford. Joe says, without basic fact-checking, people online, in power or on air can spew any sort of nonsense. You got it, baby. Spewing nonsense is the essence of a free society. A society where you can't spew nonsense is not a free society. Charlie Citrine says, Bill Gates, you don't think he pays them to contradict him, do you? No, that's why it's very interesting to know about full facts, full funding from all these American money bags. It's weird the way somehow the guarantors of safety now are wealthy American bazillionaires. Really? Good luck with that. Derek says, just wondering why you've linked the Pakistani rape cases with vaccine problems. Bizarre. Surely it would be better to concentrate on one subject. We do. The vaccine was to stop people dying from COVID, not from catching COVID. Wrong. It was 95% prevent infection, slow the spread. The whole thing, that you could look it up. 95%. You won't get it. They changed the story because your thing actually is that it doesn't work. And they're both examples. They're not connected in any way, except they're both examples of how of total media dishonesty in the United Kingdom, which I'm getting sick of, because the one bolsters the other. If you're allowed to talk about Pakistani rape gangs in Bradford and Rotherham and Oldham and Telford dishonestly, you get into the habit of that. So you start to cover other stories dishonestly. I could have thrown in, I mentioned climate change. I mentioned migrants. Migrants, it's talked about always as, oh yes, these people making these terrible journeys in these dinghies across to the... We've got to find a way to make it safe for illegal immigrants to land on England's shore. Once you start narrowing the bounds of discourse so that we have... And Asian men is a very good example. Leilani has a Filipina mum. The Philippines are off the coast of whatever it is, Southwest Asia. There are not Filipinas involved in the gang rape of children in Rotherham and Oldham. The dishonesty is what these stories have in common, Derek. You should be able to handle one bit of dishonesty at a time. One of the few truly inspiring moments in this stinker of a year was the Canadian truckers convoy, which sprung up a few months back on the west coast and the east coast of the Senior Dominion. And the trucks set off to converge on Jacinda Trudeau's Ottawa and harsh his totalitarian mellow. The jackbooted mammy singer refused to have any truck with the truckers and was immediately taken to a secure location in blackface. Jacinda, as you can see, he doesn't just do the blackface, he does the black arms, black legs, black torso to sing Swanee, Mammy to himself in a darkened room for a fortnight. And for one brief shining moment, the truckers reigned in Ottawa. Andrew Lawton was there on the streets, and he's got the pepper spray scars to prove it, courtesy of the useless Ottawa coppers, and he's now written a book about it, which is out tomorrow, The Freedom Convoy, the inside story of 3 weeks that shook the world. Andrew, you were there with the truckers on the streets. What was the atmosphere like in Ottawa with the truckers while you were there?
You know, from the moment they got there, it was just a party. I mean, everyone saw the bouncy castles and the hot tubs and the saunas and the pig roast, but that didn't just come later on. It was like that from the moment I got there. I mean, the most notable example of this, when I got to my hotel the first day, it was the night before the convoy officially arrived, and the mask mandate, which had been in place in Ontario and Ottawa and much of Canada for at least, a year and a half at that point, was just gone because people simply weren't complying. And at a certain point, the hotel staff decided to abandon the mask mandate as well. So really, these people were living the life that the government had taken away from them for the last 2 years, and they were just having a good time with it.
Yeah, and let's not forget that this all arose when truckers who've kept what passes for normality going were told that in order to cross the US-Canadian border, they'd have to show proof of vaccination status. So it was one of those vaccine mandates. They had a tremendous impact. Within days, the useless squish who leads the purportedly Conservative Party in Canada had gone. I can't even remember that loser's name. And various provinces, Alberta and Quebec, abandoned all their COVID regimes virtually overnight. Why do you think they tried it in the United States and it never quite got going? They tried a little bit of it in Europe and Australia too, but it never quite worked. Why do you think it worked in Canada but not elsewhere?
I think in Canada, you had a lot more support that had been built up for quote unquote essential workers throughout the pandemic. And I mean, even from Justin Trudeau earlier on, he had given that tweet about how we should all thank a trucker because they're the ones that are driving the bananas across the border, driving diapers across the border. They're driving auto parts. They're the ones that kept going when the rest of us were locked down. So all of us as Canadians were told that these were our heroes. And I think that worked against the government in a way, because when the government turns around and puts this punitive vaccine mandate in place, which, by the way, is still in place now, they never relented on that. Canadians, even who aren't particularly political, let alone libertarian, were saying, but hang on, I thought these were the heroes of the pandemic. I thought these were the ones that we were supposed to bend over backwards to thank for keeping going. And I think that was a big part of the story in Canada. And it's not to say that other countries didn't have a similar support level for essential workers, but in Canada, it was really driven home.
When we're looking now at photos of the cops, and they're all there in the full RoboCop, I mean, they look like stormtroopers. They're not like the Mounties who were at the Platinum Jubilee observances at Windsor Castle the other day. These are hardcore, serious coppers. Trudeau invoked the emergencies, the so-called Emergencies Act, and he briefly turned parts of Canada, at least, into a dictatorship.
Yes, and these police officers that we saw unmarked, you couldn't even tell which force a lot of them came from because they were importing police officers from all over the country, from across the river in Quebec, from cities across Ontario, and they were completely anonymized in how they were, which I think for a lot of them was probably to their credit, because I know privately a lot of police officers were supporting the convoy, and some have actually been reprimanded for saying as much publicly. But it was quite chilling that all of a sudden this government that says we're respecting your right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, was threatening people with arrest for daring to walk down the street, even if you weren't protesting. At a certain point, when they had invoked that Emergencies Act, if you were walking down the street in Ottawa, you could be stopped by police, you could be harassed, and you could be arrested. And I wasn't arrested, but I was threatened with arrest if I didn't prove something that had a reason to be there in the officer's opinion. And this is what literally became of this Canada that is supposedly one of the freest places on earth.
Yeah, I don't kind of buy that anymore. I mean, we've all learnt a lot. I mean, it's been a depressing time for those of us who believe in the Westminster system. Essentially, Trudeau made it illegal for unvaccinated people to take a train from Montreal to Toronto. There are UK citizens who have been trapped in Canada and are being prevented from leaving Canada because they don't have enough shots in their arm to satisfy the guy. So basically, there's along the 49th parallel, there's basically a big maple curtain, not an iron curtain, but it's a little softer than that. But there's basically a big maple curtain. He's not giving up on this, is he?
No, I mean, the illegal immigrants can walk across the border into Quebec. They're fine. Ukrainian refugees can be unvaccinated, but someone from the United States, someone from the United Kingdom, someone from Australia that wants to go into Canada cannot go in unless they're vaccinated. And last week, the government said it was going to suspend the vaccine mandate to board a domestic plane. So in Canada, up until Monday, actually, of this week, you needed to be vaccinated to get on a plane or get on a train. They've suspended that, but at the same press conference, they said it's because they're in the process of transitioning to a new definition of fully vaccinated. So before long, even the two-dosers won't be allowed to get on planes, potentially.
No, I know. They'll be the new pariahs. Shame on them. What's wrong with you? Your arm's only good for 2 shots? Thank you very much, Andrew. The book is out tomorrow. The Freedom Convoy, the inside story of 3 weeks that shook the world. 3 weeks that shook the world is not something that anyone's ever said about Canada before, but it was true in the case of the trucker convoy. Stump the Steyn looms, GB Views at GB News, as does Anne McElhenney. Don't touch that dial. We're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Anne McElhinney and her husband are best-selling authors, movie makers, theatrical producers, and they've just launched a true crimes podcast with a look at the mass-murdering abortionist Kermit Gosnell, the biggest serial killer in American history. Anne's back with us. Before we get to the podcast, Anne, I must ask you about this story we talked about a month or so back. It was about a, quote, Sligo man who'd killed 2 gay men and was trying to kill a third. And to read the Irish press, it was all to do with deeply ingrained Catholic homophobia. And then we got the accused's name, and it turned out to be a slightly different kind of story, a bit too awkward for the prissy types of the Dublin media. And I see the fellow appeared in court last week, Yusef Palani of Markowitz Heights, named for Countess Markowitz, famously the first woman to be elected to the House of Commons. So that right there is like a shortcut through the last 100 years of Irish history. Yusef Palani, Markowitz Heights, all in one accused in the Irish court system. Has the Dublin press got any more honest about what's going on?
No, not that I have noticed. I actually didn't know that he had been in court last week, but yeah, what an extraordinary story. A great opportunity for Irish liberals everywhere to throw Catholics under the bus, or homophobics under the bus, and say, you know, oh, it was a time where we needed to reflect on who we really were, you know, in Ireland. No, we didn't need to reflect on anything, actually, because apparently, you know, beheadings are just not something. As I said to you the last time, you know, glassing in pubs after 14 pints, that's more our style in Ireland. We're really not great on the beheadings, but apparently it's been introduced by other people, and this is what the Irish media are like now, and they ran with that story, and they ran with it, and they loved it. That, you know, of course, this was exactly the kind of thing you'd expect in priest-ridden Ireland.
Yeah. Priest-ridden. Celebrate diversity. So there's a lot more machetes around than there used to be. Now, when I first spoke to you about this Kermit Gosnell project of yours, as you say, he's the biggest mass murderer in American history. And I said rather offensively to you and your charming husband, you two are basically just a couple of Irish chances in Hollywood. How come Steven Spielberg and co aren't stampeding to this story? And yet here we are, whatever it is, 5 years later, and you still have a virtual monopoly on this man because the American media won't go anywhere near it.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. Everything about this story is the kind of thing that should lead. I mean, as you say, Steven Spielberg, they should be lining up to make a movie about this. People should be lining up to report on the details of this case. You know, it's extraordinary, horrific what this guy did. And we have no reason to think that people like him don't continue to operate in the United States of America. Nothing has really changed. This is a guy who ran this house of horrors, and for 17 years was not inspected by anyone from the Department of Health. You know, we know this. 2 women died, Samika Shaw, a young African-American woman, and Karnamaya Monger, a Bhutanese refugee, you know? And it's unbelievable to think, right? These 2 women died after botched abortions in Kermit Gosnell's clinic, and no one bothered to investigate. They didn't cross the threshold of this place in West Philadelphia. You know, you have to wonder. You know, my father used to always say, you know, he was always fascinated by people who had permanent pensionable jobs. He couldn't get over it. He was like, my God, imagine having a permanent pensionable job. So all these people with permanent pensionable jobs in Harrisburg sat on their behinds while this guy was murdering with impunity, and not obviously just those 2 women. We know from the grand jury, we know from the investigation and the subsequent trial, he killed thousands of babies who were born alive, and he cut their necks with scissors.
And they were all over his so-called medical facility. That's what's up, because he liked to keep souvenir feet of the babies. So he had pickled jars of pickled baby parts, you know. So if you said, oh, I wouldn't mind, you don't happen to have a Diet Mountain Dew, or do you, for me to drink? And you'd go to the cupboard where they keep the soft drinks, and there'd be jars of baby feet in there. People were astonished when you talked about this before, that this is what it's like.
Extraordinary. I mean, so basically, the only reason that we're talking about this is because of one cop who was an undercover drug investigator with the district attorney's office, Detective Jim Wood, who, you know, obviously on top of the abortion business, Gosnell was selling prescriptions for opioids. So they have this raid on the clinic one night. A whole bunch of police arrive. About 18 of them. They go in. The first thing that hits them is the smell, which is like a wall. I mean, they all talk about it. It was like you could almost see it. It was so bad. There was this extraordinary smell. And they knew, because these were hardened cops who'd seen a lot, and they knew it was the smell of death. They knew it was the smell of rotting flesh. So they walk in there. They see cats walking around in the procedure rooms. Gosnell himself is wearing torn, bloody gloves and eating salmon teriyaki. And as you say, at one point, the detectives walked into a room at the same place where the staff ate their peanut butter and Jell-O sandwiches, and there is row upon row and jar after jar of children's baby feet that have been cut off by this guy who's a serial killer and who was keeping trophies. And it wasn't just that. The bodies were piled up in the basement because he had fallen out with his hazmat company. So, you know, this was an extraordinary place. And it was in plain sight. He was hiding in plain sight, and no one did anything.
No, absolutely terrible. The podcast, I think it's true. What's your URL for the podcast there, Anne?
That's right, serialkillerpod.com. Go to serialkillerpod.com. Listen to the first episode right now and share it with people, because there's 6 episodes coming at you, giving this incredible story. We also include reenactments from the court case as well. I mean, it's very dramatic stuff.
Okay. Serialkillerpod.com, and it's well worth your time. And Steven Spielberg and all the other Butch boys should have done it. That'll do it for us, but I have some great news for you. Just 2 words. Patrick Christys. What do you got, Patrick?
Lows, can I just say what a fantastic show it is, and also as well, fantastic. I'm filling in for Dan Wootton. This is the last time I'm doing it, apparently, but it's great to do the handover with you. You are, Mark, quite literally a highlight of my day. You normally have to pay people to say that. So we've got loads coming up, Mark. Let me tell you, right? Let me tell you. So we've got, is Scotland going to pardon witches? We're also going to be dealing with a lot more stuff as well, a lot more serious stuff. So the Brexit anniversary as well. I'm getting stuck into that. We haven't seen the best of Brexit yet, OK? But I actually do think that Brexit obviously has been a good thing. And how is Boris going to do in these by-elections? We're going live at 10 p.m. to the scene in Wakefield to see whether or not this is D-Day for Boris Johnson. And, of course, something you're very passionate about, Mark, the Grooming Gang latest.
OK, absolutely. Patrick, by the way, is the king of the handovers. He should be teaching in handover school. That's all coming up after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest forecast. We're looking at a humid night across the UK, but it will turn fresher over the next 24 hours or so as breezy and unsettled weather moves in. And that's in association with an area of low pressure which is going to move in and sit with us for the weekend, pushing away that warm weather we've had over the last few days. Green colours here indicating a fresher, breezy feel to things to come. Over Thursday evening, we'll see thundery showers disappear. Overnight, we'll see clear skies developing. So quite a dry night for many of us, but a warm and humid one to come. Temperatures remaining in double figures, 14, 15, 16 Celsius in places. So a humid, uncomfortable night for many of us. But it means a dry start for a lot of us as we go into Friday morning. The best of the sunshine across northern England, eastern England by the afternoon. And the heat and humidity holds on here, so we could see a few showers by the afternoon. A few rumbles of thunder possible as well. Elsewhere, fairly cloudy skies. There will be quite a lot of dry weather around, but a weather front will bring rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Wales and southwest England through the day. And here, fresher 19, 20 Celsius, but the humidity holds on across eastern England, 24 or 25. The The thunderstorms move away as we move through Friday evening. This band of rain pushes north and east across the country, heralding fresher air behind it. A mixture of showers and clear skies moving in during the early hours, and the wind starting to pick up from the west too. Temperatures much more comfortable for sleeping Friday night into Saturday morning, 14, 13 Celsius as a low in places. So a bit more of an unsettled start to the weekend. We'll see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers across much of the UK. Bands of rain across Northern Ireland too, turning windy through the Irish Sea. Gales developing around the coast of Northern Ireland. And this remains so over the next few days. Further sunshine and showers, temperatures around average for the time of year.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious